I wasn't planning to stop by her place that day. I just finished a delivery shift, the kind where your legs feel heavy but your head feels even heavier. I saw her from across the street, arms straining under two big rolls of fabric. No one else seemed to notice. "Let me get those," I called, jogging over before I could think twice. She looked up, same steady eyes, same hair pulled back with a clip like it always was, and gave me that polite smile she keeps for neighbors and people she's not sure she should thank too much. "They're heavier than they look." Inside her house smelled faintly of starch and fabric dye. The radio was on low, some song from before I was born. She nudged the door shut with her foot and went straight to the table, unrolling one bolt of fabric with practiced hands. I stood there, not sure if I should stay. "You want tea?" she asked without looking up. "Sure," I said, even though I'd just had coffee. The kettle hissed, then clicked. She poured the tea slowly, steady stream into a chipped white cup, then another. Her hands were small but quick, the way they always were when she was working. I caught myself watching them longer than I should have. "You still doing the delivery work?" she asked. "Yeah. Mostly evenings now." I took the cup she handed me, the steam fogging my glasses for a second. "Must get lonely," she said, almost casually. I shrugged, blowing on the tea. "Sometimes." We sat across from each other, cups between us, fabric spread out like some quiet witness. She sipped her tea, eyes somewhere over my shoulder, and I thought about how it had been 2 years since I'd first met her, not through her, but through her son. He'd been my friend. My best friend. And now here I was, still coming around, still finding excuses. She didn't talk much at first, never does. But when she does, it's in these short, weighty bursts, like she's been holding it in too long. That afternoon, after a silence so long I almost stood to leave, she set her cup down and said, very softly, "You're the only one who really listens." I don't know why that hit the way it did. Maybe because I knew she didn't mean it as a compliment. She meant it like a fact, a slightly sad one. Like maybe other people in her life had stopped trying. I just nodded, because anything else would have been too much. We finished our tea. I folded the napkin I'd been fidgeting with and set it neatly on the saucer. She noticed, her eyes flicked down, then back up, but didn't say anything. I was halfway to the door when she said, "If you're not busy tomorrow, I could use a hand with the sewing machine. It's been jamming." Her voice was casual, but I felt something unspoken under it. "I'll come by," I said. She just nodded, like she already knew my answer. That night, I stared at my phone longer than usual. I typed out a message, "What time should I come tomorrow?" But didn't send it. Instead, I put the phone down and listened to the quiet hum of my small apartment. It felt louder than it should have. When I got there the next afternoon, she was already at the table, sleeves rolled up, the sewing machine sitting in front of her like an uncooperative pet. "It's the bobbin," she said. "I think." I set my bag down and leaned in. The air smelled faintly of fabric softener and the faint citrus perfume she always wore, the same one I remembered from when her son was still around. I tried not to notice it, but I did. She stood beside me while I fiddled with the machine, her shoulder just close enough that I could feel the heat of it. "Never was any good with these things," she said, half smiling. "My mother could fix one in her sleep." I skipped that part of her lessons. "You sew all day though," I said, glancing up. "That's different." "I keep it running as long as it behaves." She paused, then, quieter, "Guess I'm like that with most things." I didn't ask what she meant. But the way she said it made me think of the half-empty chair at her kitchen table. I got the bobbin seated right, threaded the needle, and pressed the pedal gently. The machine hummed again, smooth and even. She let out a breath, the kind people do when something small but stubborn finally gives way. "Your mother ever teach you this stuff?" she asked, guiding the fabric under the needle now. "No. She worked nights. I mostly learned to make noodles from instant packets." She laughed, not loudly, but enough to make her hand pause over the fabric. "That explains the time you came over and tried to cook rice without rinsing it. I hadn't thought about that in years." I'd been 17, at her son's place, hungry after school. She'd walked in, taken the pot from me, and said, "You'll break your teeth on this." The memory made something twist in my chest, because back then it had all been easy, the three of us in the kitchen, her humming while we ate. Now it was just the two of us, and I wasn't sure which of us felt the absence more. While she stitched, I sat across from her, sipping tea she'd set out without asking. The sound of the machine filled the room, steady and soft, like it was trying not to disturb us. At one point, she brushed a stray thread off my sleeve without looking up. It was such a small thing, but it made my breath catch. I told myself it meant nothing, but I didn't quite believe it. When the last seam was done, she looked at me for a long second before saying, "You're good company." I smiled, though it felt too tight. "You too." As I left, she touched my arm lightly, just her fingertips, to steady me as I stepped over the fabric rolls by the door. It was nothing. But it stayed with me longer than I wanted it to. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It had been a week since I'd last been over. Work had shifted to earlier hours, and the gap between visits felt longer than it should. When I finally knocked, she answered quickly, as if she'd been nearby. "You're early," she said, though I hadn't told her I was coming at all. Her living room was warmer than usual, the faint smell of something baking drifting in from the kitchen. She waved me toward the table where a few shirts were folded. "Thought I'd mend these before they get worse." I sat, watching her thread a needle, the light catching on the fine lines near her eyes. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from a friend, but I didn't look. "You've been busy," she said. "Yeah." I paused. "I thought about stopping by sooner." She gave a small nod, but didn't look up. "It's fine. People have their own lives." Something in her tone made me want to explain, to say I hadn't been avoiding her. But the words felt too heavy in my throat. Half an hour in, her neighbor popped by. A woman in her 50s, carrying a basket of eggs. She glanced at me, then back at her, and I saw it, that slight, curious shift in her smile. "Helping out again?" the neighbor asked. "Just passing through," I said, a little too quickly. When the neighbor left, the air felt different. Like we were both aware of something we hadn't been before. She reached for the scissors beside my hand, her fingers brushing mine in a way that felt longer than it should. "You okay?" I asked. Her lips pressed together, as if she was weighing the truth. "Some days are harder than others," she said. I nodded, even though I wanted to ask which kind of hard she meant. Instead, I leaned forward slightly. "I could come by more. If you need." She looked at me then, really looked, like she was about to say something else. But the ticking clock in the kitchen filled the pause, and whatever it was slipped away. We worked side by side, folding and stacking. Her sleeve brushed my arm. My knee bumped hers under the table. Little things that would mean nothing to anyone else. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. I was halfway through saying, "See you," when she reached out, her hand hovering at my chest, not quite a touch. I froze. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then back to my face. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she stepped back, just a fraction, and said, "Don't catch cold." I left without looking back, my hands tight in my pockets. And all the way home, I kept replaying that moment, the half-step closer, the half-breath between us, wondering what would have happened if neither of us had pulled away. It rained all morning, a thin, steady curtain that made the streets smell like wet concrete and old leaves. By late afternoon, the clouds thinned, and she called. Not a text, a call. "Could you help me carry something from the shop?" she asked. When we finished, instead of heading straight back, she suggested we take the long way. The air was cool, the pavement slick. We ended up at the bench near the river, the one with paint peeling from years of sun and rain. She sat first. I stayed standing a moment longer, then joined her, leaving just enough space between us that our shoulders didn't touch. "I saw you the other day," she said, looking at the water. I frowned. "Where?" "By the bakery." "You were with a girl." I tried to remember. "She's a friend from work." She gave a small nod, but her eyes stayed on the river. "You seemed comfortable." It wasn't what she said, it was the way her voice caught before that last word. I wanted to say it didn't mean anything. That the girl was just someone I barely knew outside of deliveries. But my throat tightened. Instead, I said, "You sounded different just now." Her hands were clasped in her lap, fingers working against each other. "I don't like surprises," she murmured. "And sometimes I forget you have your own world outside of here." Something in my chest pulled tight. "You're part of that world." She looked at me then, sharp, searching. "Am I?" It was quiet except for the faint rush of the river and the occasional splash from a bird diving in. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I didn't. I kept mine on my knees. "You matter to me," I said, the words sounding smaller than I meant them to. Her mouth curved, but not into a smile. More like she was trying to hold one back. "You matter to me too. Maybe more than you should." The pause after that was heavier than the clouds had been all day. I almost told her, almost said how I think about her even when I don't mean to, how I notice the way she folds fabric or hums without realizing. But the words stayed behind my teeth. She let out a slow breath. "This is dangerous, isn't it?" I swallowed. "Probably." Her gaze flicked down, to my hands, to the space between us, then back to my face. I could feel something shifting, like the air before lightning. And then she asked, almost too quietly to hear, "What are we doing?" After that afternoon by the river, I didn't see her for almost 2 weeks. At first, I told myself it was just timing, my shifts, her work. Then I started noticing small changes. The curtains in her front window stayed drawn during the day. The radio, usually playing low when I passed by, was silent. One evening, I walked past and saw her light on. My hand almost went to knock, but she was sitting at the table with someone. A man. Older, broad-shouldered, leaning in as if he knew the place well. I kept walking. The next day, I didn't stop by. Or the day after that. By the third day, she called. The first ring felt like relief, the second like hesitation. I didn't answer. When I finally picked up a day later, she sounded different, lighter, almost brisk. "I've been busy," she said. "Had an old friend visiting." "Oh," I said, though the word came out flat. "You know how it is," she added, as if that explained something. I wanted to ask who he was, if he was just a friend or something more. But my voice didn't trust me. Instead, I said, "Right. Of course." The call ended quickly. No invitation to stop by. For the next week, I threw myself into extra shifts. I told myself it was just work, just keeping busy. But every time I passed her street, my eyes slid to her door. The chair on her porch stayed empty. One afternoon, I ran into the neighbor, the one with the eggs. She asked, "Haven't seen you over there lately. Everything okay?" I smiled like it was nothing. "Just busy." She tilted her head, a knowing little motion. "She's been keeping to herself. More than usual." That night, I typed out a message, "Do you want company?" I stared at it until the screen dimmed. I didn't send it. The next morning, I passed the bench by the river on my way to a delivery. Our bench. The rain from the night before had left a dark patch where someone might have sat. I don't know why, but I imagined her there, waiting, or maybe not thinking of me at all. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was late when I saw her light on. I wasn't planning to stop. I just finished a delivery run, the night air still damp from rain, but my feet slowed when I reached her gate. Before I could think about it too much, I knocked. She opened the door halfway. She looked tired, hair loose, wearing an old sweater I'd never seen before. "You're out late," she said. "Yeah." I hesitated. "I was passing by." She stepped aside, just enough for me to enter. The house was quiet. A pot of tea sat on the table, steam curling from the spout. "Tea?" she asked. I nodded, sitting down while she poured. My hands wrapped around the warm cup, but I didn't drink right away. She sat across from me, watching. "You've been busy," she said. "So have you." Her eyes lowered for a moment. "You saw him." I didn't answer right away. I wasn't looking for anything. I just saw. "He's an old friend," she said, then paused. "But I didn't think to tell you." Maybe I should have. Something in my chest loosened, but not enough to make speaking easy. "It's not my business," I said. "Maybe it is," she said quietly. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Neither of us moved. "I don't know what we're doing," I admitted, the words feeling heavier than I'd expected. "I come here, we talk, we don't talk. I think about you when I shouldn't. And then I stop showing up because I'm not sure if I'm supposed to." Her hand rested on the table, close enough to touch. "You're not the only one who thinks about it." I looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't smiling, wasn't turning it into a joke. "It scares me," she said. "Not because of the years between us. Not because of what people would think. Because I don't want to lose what we already have." The hum in my ears was louder than the ticking clock. "I'd rather have something real," I said, "even if it's less than what I want." Her eyes softened. For a moment, she looked like she might reach across the table. Instead, she just exhaled, slow and steady. "I don't have an answer tonight," she said. "Okay," I replied. We sat there, the tea cooling between us, until she smiled, small, tired, but real, and I found myself smiling back. It wasn't an ending. But it was something. The weeks after that night felt lighter somehow. Not because anything had been decided, but because we'd stopped pretending there was nothing to decide. We didn't talk about us again, not directly. But I came by more, and she let me. Sometimes in the mornings, when the sun hit her front window just right, she'd wave me in before I could even knock. We fell into a rhythm. I'd fix little things around the house, she'd make tea, sometimes coffee if she knew I'd been up late. We didn't need long conversations. A look, a half smile, a small joke about the stubborn sewing machine, those said enough. One Sunday, she asked if I wanted to walk to the river. We ended up at the same bench, paint still peeling, the water running low from a dry spell. She sat close enough this time that our shoulders brushed, and neither of us moved away. "Feels smaller," I said, nodding toward the water. Or maybe we just got bigger, she replied, eyes on the ripples. We stayed until the light shifted and the air turned cool. On the way back, she reached for my arm when the path dipped, casual, steady, like it had always been that way. That became a kind of quiet agreement. No promises. No declarations. Just showing up. Months passed. Summer blurred into early autumn. I'd still catch her humming while she worked, the same tune I'd heard years ago when her son was alive. It didn't hurt to hear it anymore, not the way it used to. It felt like part of the house, part of her. One morning, I arrived earlier than usual. The clock on her wall read 8:47, I noticed because she'd once told me it was her favorite time of day, though she never said why. She poured tea without asking, setting the cup in front of me. "You're early," she said. "Yeah." I took the cup, fingers brushing hers. "Thought I'd stay a while." Her smile was small, but it stayed. "Okay." The bench, the tea, the half-finished shirt still draped over a chair, all of it was still there. But the air between us had changed. Not charged. Not heavy. Just warm. I don't think either of us needed to name it. We'd both lived long enough to know that some things matter more when you don't pin them down. And maybe that's why, months later, when I think about what we are, I don't picture the almost moments or the pauses. I picture her pouring tea at 8:47 a.m., sliding the cup toward me with that quiet look, the one that says, "You stayed."